reached. For more on all of this, let's get to Jamil Jaffer. He's the founder and executive director of the National Security Institute. Jamil, thank you so much for being here this evening. It does appear that the Arab world is increasingly critical of what Israel is doing in Gaza. And you hear from moderates even like King Abdullah of Jordan criticizing Israel today. And that just fans the flames of this potential regional conflict, does it not?
It does, Jonathan. I'm reminded about the days after 9/11. We suffered 3,000 casualties that day on a population of about 280 million at the time. And Israel lost 1,400 people on a population of about 9 million. That's the equivalent of a dozen 9/11s in a single day. And you didn't hear any of our allies calling for a ceasefire when we went after al-Qaeda around the world or in Afghanistan. So the idea that we see a ceasefire any time before Hamas is destroyed is, I think, unimaginable to the Israelis and should be unimaginable to all of our allies.
Yeah, it's interesting, Jamil. People talk about the civilian death toll in Gaza, and that is obviously tragic. But in war, civilians get harmed. It is a sad fact of war. It was a sad fact in Afghanistan. It was a sad fact in Iraq. It has been a sad fact in every war. But the world seems to look at Israel more critically, differently.
That's exactly right. And look, the truth is, Jonathan, the rules don't apply differently to Israel than they do to anybody else. Their job is to avoid civilian casualties. They're going to try and do that. But the reality is, it's Hamas that is telling civilians, stay in North Gaza, don't leave, don't go south. So if there's anybody that doesn't have a regard for Gazan lives, it's Hamas itself that's telling its own civilians, stay here, knowing an attack is coming.
Yeah, and Jamil, talking of Hamas and their preparations, they've had 2 weeks now since they carried out those terrible terrorist attacks to get prepared in Gaza, admittedly under this bombardment, but they've had 2 weeks to prepare, and I don't think anybody would be foolish enough to think when they were planning those awful terrorist attacks, they weren't planning too for what came next. So it's going to be a horribly tough fight if, or perhaps more accurately, when Israel moves in on the ground.
No, that's exactly right. It's going to be very bloody. It's going to be very bloody for the Israelis. They're going to walk into, as you noted earlier, booby-trapped entrances. There are 200 individuals that are being held hostage now, some of them Americans. Those hostages may lose their lives in these operations as Israel seeks to take out Hamas and rescue those hostages. This is Hamas's doing. They killed 1,400 civilians in a single day. They took 200 hostages. They're holding them in tunnels underneath Gaza. They're the reasons Gaza is going to be attacked over the next days and weeks. It's nobody's fault but Hamas.
It's taken longer than I think a lot of people thought it would for the Israeli Defense Forces to make this move in terms of a ground invasion of Gaza, if indeed it comes. Do you think that is more likely the result of pressure from other world leaders, including President Biden, or do you think it is the result of Prime Minister Netanyahu having this horrible Sophie's choice, if you like, regarding the fate of the hostages and what might happen to them if and when the ground forces go in?
I think it's all of the above. I think that the Israeli forces are preparing so that when they go in, they're fully ready. Again, this was a surprise attack. They didn't see it coming. And so this is an important part of being ready and going in with full force. At the same time, they're no doubt worried about those 200 hostages who are being held by these Hamas terrorists. And, of course, there has been significant pressure from the world. We saw the lies being told about the hospital bombing. It turns out to have been a Palestinian Islamic Jihad errant missile, not an Israeli airstrike. And yet that caused a significant amount of concern, and the Israelis have taken their time. So there's no doubt when the Israelis go in, they will go in with full force. They will go door-to-door if necessary and take out Hamas, just like the U.S. did, by the way, for 20 years, going after al-Qaeda's leadership all around the globe. And it kept us safe for 2 decades here in the United States from a mass casualty terror attack. We cannot expect anything less from our allies.
Jamil Jaffer, thank you so much for being with us tonight, Jamil.
Thanks, Jonathan.